Hello folks, my name is Richard Ward. This is English 101. What we are going to be talking about today is going to be rhetorical analysis and thesis statements. So without further ado, let's jump right into this and see if we can't just dig in and get going here. So touching back on what we kind of talked about on the last video, I want you guys to remember that when it comes to doing the rhetorical analysis assignment that I'm asking for in this class, make sure that you understand that I don't want you to decide on your thesis right out of the gate, okay? Never start with it straight from the beginning. When we do that, we tend to create a confirmation bias loop where we are going out, we're doing a very research bias kind of search where we are only looking to prove in our research what we've stated within our thesis. Instead, you might want to try asking a research question and trying to figure out how to get to the bottom of that. When you're thinking on a topic for your rhetorical analysis, I want you to employ this principle of copia. That is, generate as much material as you can from as many different angles as you can, and then use the most interesting information for building what you want to build in your thesis. And especially when it comes to rhetorical analyses, you also want to try to focus on, everybody can see these obvious appeals often, right? Especially if you look at things like the ASPCA ad with Sarah McLachlan, where she's singing the sad song of In the Arms of an Angel, and it shows all of these little dogs and cats and how sad they look and all that. When we're looking at rhetorical analysis, it is almost like preaching to the choir when we start looking at how the elements of pathos work. Of course it's going to be filled with pathos. The sadness is seething from these commercials, these ad campaigns. Instead, you might want to try to focus more along the lines on even ethos. You could try to focus a little bit more on ethos, but even that can be pretty easy to find in an ad such as the one we just talked about, where you've got the ASPCA, which has been around for forever, and you have Sarah McLachlan, who is going to come with her own kind of extrinsic ethos, where she is going to, may not necessarily have all the information on how the ASPCA works and all that stuff, and maybe wasn't there at the founding of it, but because of the sad songs and because of her care for the animals, all of these things kind of translate over into an ethos for her. Instead, a really novel kind of way to go with that might be to look at what kind of logos is being used in there. Of course, we have these logistical appeals of what's blatant and in front of us. Sure, statistically speaking, we have this amount of animals that are going neglected, and statistically speaking, this amount of animals is not going to get adopted. And it'll state this stuff outright within the video. But then we have the subtle arguments into logos, such as these appeals towards making an argument that the fact that I'm going to make these very sad, it's going to elicit a certain response from my audience. My audience is going to be sad enough to donate money, to adopt a dog, to adopt a cat. It's going to create an actionable outcome. When those things happen, that is a very logical line of thinking. If I create this, then this shall happen, and it's very enthymemic. It's very syllogistic. Because of this and this and this, therefore this. So look at how these things get created within your material. Don't just go straight after the obvious. Start looking in between the lines. Next, I would like us to kind of differentiate between summary and analysis. So the textbook calls a summary. The textbook actually says that a summary is going to be the use of one's own words and sentences, sentence structure to condense someone else's text into a version that gives the main ideas of the original. So by that, we're saying We're taking a larger text and we're going to compress it down, including the main ideas, but we're not going to be offering up any kind of new content. It is a retelling of something that came before. In this, summaries are very good for setting backdrops and backgrounds into the information that we're going to be looking at. And case in point for your rhetorical analysis. Your rhetorical analysis paper should probably be about 10 to 15% of summary. And in those summaries, I'm talking about at the very beginning, you're going to give me a little bit of background, a little bit of information that goes into what is being created, right? And then when you go in and you start to talk about specific examples of ethos, pathos, logos, kairos, doxa, whatever you choose to go and tackle, right? When you start to go in and look at those, let's say it's a 5-minute video and you're skipping 3 minutes in, you may have to give me some context, and that includes a brief summary of what is to come. So give me a really quick, really brief summary of what we're going to be talking about, and then start pointing to those examples, okay? So what is an analysis then? So again, referring to the textbook says that an analysis is going to be a genre that breaks something down into its component parts so that those parts can be thought about methodically in order to understand the whole better. So what we're doing is, if we're looking at this as, let's say if this was in a manual, this is the blown up kind of like diagram of each individual part. So we're looking at what these parts are, and then we're looking and trying to decide what they are going to be doing. So as far as the rhetorical analysis goes, 85 to 90% of this entire text that I'm going to be asking you to do is going to be built upon analysis. And this is going to come from a lot of unique and original thought from you, not summary. So whereas the summary asks you just to go and retell something, the analysis asks you to go in, blow this piece up, and then I want you to go and start to detail what these examples do and how they do it. So when it comes to a thesis statement, I want us to remember a very simple formula, okay? I want you to remember claim plus evidence equals thesis, okay? A good thesis, a good strong thesis is going to typically include those. It's not going to be overly specific in such a way that it pigeonholes you and narrows you into such a small, tight little framework that you don't have enough information to talk about. But at the same time, it's not too vague either. So some simple tips to help remember how to make a good, strong thesis might be, one might be avoid using the first person and first person phrases such as I believe or I think. And if I could ever give you any kind of advice on any professional documents that you ever create in the history of ever or in the future for anything you do, try to avoid I believes and I thinks, especially in academic writing, because it starts to remove the element of objectivity and starts to introduce a little too much subjectivity. Beyond that, it also weakens what you're trying to say. These are very non-committal statements, I believe and I think. There's the redundancy in that it's already your paper, therefore we know it's something you believe or you think. And that's fine. But it also implies that I might not be sure. I believe and I think means I'm speaking from my standpoint, and that doesn't make it the right answer. Again, this is stuff that we kind of know as readers going into something. We know how opinions work. There's no need to try to weaken your argument by saying I believe or I think. I also need you to remember too that your thesis statement should work as a guide for your reader. Okay, this is going to forecast everything that's going to come in your essay, everything that you're going to be talking about. When it comes to your thesis is outlining everything for you, and you can pretty much go and use the outlining features in like Microsoft Word to go in and kind of fill in those gaps. It also helps prevent the element of surprise or digression, right? We don't want to be surprised while we're going through and reading your piece. At the same time, we don't want you digressing and going off track into different directions We need to stay on topic, so it serves both the reader and yourself to keep you on track. The thesis also asserts, it's going to assert your conclusion, and it takes and summarizes the text's main or most interesting rhetorical strategies. Not just the obvious rhetorical strategies that people come to see in, these sad videos or uplifting videos or whatever. It looks at the stuff between the lines. We're looking at the interesting points. All these things go in to help make it successful. It's not always the most obvious things, right? And also, your thesis statement states what techniques you're going to be focusing on in your analysis and the impact these techniques and the effectiveness of the text. Is that text successfully deploying ethos, pathos, and logos in these ways? And this is going to help guide us on what makes it a better piece. So one example of a very weak thesis statement might be something like the brochure tries to convince prospective students to attend Michigan Tech. Right? That is basically just an opinion in and of itself. There's no evidence, there's no supporting material, and it's honestly boring. There's nothing there to drive the reader to want to go and do more. I can't tell you how many times I have students who will turn in a paper and call something like that a thesis. That is absolutely not a thesis, right? A better telling of that exact same thesis might be the brochure uses student anecdotes, job placement statistics, and professional quality graphics in order to establish credibility. These appeals to ethos, combined with the brochure's humor and friendly tone, create a fairly effective argument targeted at prospective students and their parents in support of attending Michigan Tech. Much better. We now suddenly have a very fleshed out thesis. We have the claim. The claim is very vibrant and very focused. But not only that, we also have evidence to why the brochure is successful in what it does. So this thesis is tying up all those good elements that we look for and makes it stronger and gives us a good guide, not just as writers, but gives the reader an idea of what's to come. Another bad example of a thesis statement might be Snyder's campaign ad uses ethos, logos, and pathos. Again, very weak. And I honestly do get these essays with these claimed as a thesis statement. This is not a thesis statement, okay? This is some sporadic, very loose evidence that's just chucked in for speed and efficiency. When we're looking at things like Snyder's campaign ad uses ethos, logos, and pathos, who doesn't? All ad campaigns use ethos, logos, and pathos. That's not enough to go on. You're stating an obvious thing that can be easily pulled apart. And it's very weak, and it doesn't really give any kind of direction. Instead, a better, a stronger thesis along that might be Snyder's campaign ad relies on cause and effect arguments that are intended to appeal to Michigan voters' fear for their economic futures and job security. Audience members who don't agree with the argument's underlying assumptions that the economic bottom line is most important, however, may not find the ad to be that persuasive. In this, again, we see this thesis statement actually jump out, okay? You now not only have just those little bits of the because statement, right? That little bit of the little bit of evidence that was, given before. Now we have a fleshed out, meaty evidentiary thesis statement, right? With all the good stuff that's going to come. We have now a new claim. The claim is that this ad relies on a cause and effect argument. So we can jump in now and we know which way we're going. We know how this is going to work out. So I'd like to thank you guys for hanging around for the thesis, for the rhetorical analysis and thesis statement video. Please feel free to watch the further videos for more instruction into how English 101 is going to be working for you guys. Thanks.